opposition in the endgame is quite an important concept. But what does opposition mean? Well, let's take this position. Now, it's black to move. It's if black moves his king to, let's say, c5, then white can copy black and go to c3. If black goes to b5, then white can again copy. If black goes backwards, then white can copy. White can always maintain this line here between the kings and this one square, meaning that black will never be able to advance into white's camp. Regardless what black plays, white can always just copy black and stop him from infiltrating. Now, in this position, when there's one square between your king and your opponent's king in a line, then you don't want to have the move. If you have the move, let's say if it's white to move here and white goes king e4, then it's black who actually has the opposition. He can go king e6. It's black that screens white now. But if it was black to move, then regardless where black goes, then the white king can screen the black king and prevent him from coming into white's camp. Now, let's say these kings were in a diagonal. It's again one square, but this time they are in a diagonal, not in a line. Now, it's the same thing. You don't want to have the move here. So let's say you're playing with the white pieces. If it's your move here as white, then black gets the opposition. If it's black to move, then white gets the opposition. But how? Let's give black a move here. Let's say it's black to move and we play king f5. Now we can maintain the diagonal opposition by king d3 here, or we can play king d5. And again, we shoulder the black king, but this time from coming to this part of the board. So now again we transposed into our linear opposition. One square and it's our opponent to move. So let's say now there are, let's put a king here and a king here. Now let's say it's black to move, but this time there are two squares. Now it's a bit different, because now a black can come to c3 and now it's our turn. Oh wait, what is the difference here? Okay, let's go back. So in this position there was only one square and one is an odd number. When there are two squares, an even number of squares, then you want to have the move. If there's an odd number of squares, you don't want to have the move. So here as white, if it's your move, you lose the opposition. The same here in a linear opposition. If it's your move, you lose the opposition. If it's black to move, then white has the opposition. If there are two squares here between the kings, and it's your move, then you have the opposition. So 2 is an even number, so you want to have the move. So when there are an even number of squares between the kings, you want to have the move. When there is an odd number of squares, then you want your opponent to have the move. So let's say we have this position. Now we say it's white to move. Guess who has the opposition here? Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares between the kings in a diagonal. So we have a diagonal and we have 6 squares. Now 6 is an even number, so king b2, king g7, king c3, king f6, king d4, and it's black to move. We reached again the one square diagonal opposition. So regardless where black goes, white gets the opposition now. Okay, what about this position in a line? It's the same. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. So we want to have the move. King, 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 and king a4. And we have our linear opposition. So the king goes here, we go here. So an even number of squares, we want to have the move. An odd number of squares, we have 5 squares here, then we want black to have the move so that we can get the opposition. Now let's say the kings were not are not standing in a diagonal or in a line. Let's say something like this. So we have our king here and our king and the opponent's king on c8. And let's say it's white to move. Can you figure out a way here for us to gain the opposition? Now, there's something called the rectangular opposition. I don't think it's called this way. I just call it this way. But we want eventually to achieve a position where we're standing in a rectangle with our king and the opponent's king, and we want this rectangle to have, so we want to enter a rectangle with our king and the opponent's king where the corners have the same color, but we want to be the ones entering the rectangle. What does that mean? Now, if we play king a2 here, then we have a rectangle, and a2, c2, c8, and a8 have the same color, but we are the ones who enter the diagonal. This means that it's black to move. Now, let's say black plays anything like king c7. Now again, the rectangle rule. We enter a rectangle which has the same color in the corners. Now let's say the king goes to b7. Now we can achieve a linear opposition if we come here. We cannot achieve a rectangular opposition anymore. If we go here, then black gets the opposition. So we can now achieve a linear opposition, but how? Remember the rule about the odd and the even number of squares? Now, if we play king b4, then we have an even number of squares between the kings, but it's black to move. We want to enter an even number of squares with our move, or we want to enter an odd number of squares with the opponent to move. Now, the only thing we can do here is play king b3. Now we have 1, 2, 3 squares between the kings. And now after king b6, king b4, we have the opposition. It's black to move. So we have the opposition. So again, we want to enter a rectangle here with the corners having the same color. But we cannot keep this all the time, because we will eventually have to enter a position where we either transfer into a linear opposition or a diagonal one. So this is a diagonal opposition, or we can instead of king a3 go king c3, a linear opposition, depending on the position and what we want to achieve. So rectangular opposition, we want to enter the rectangle with the same, where the rectangle has the same color in the corners, and this opposition or type of opposition will eventually end up being either a diagonal opposition or a linear opposition. In a diagonal opposition, if there is an odd number of squares between the kings, we don't want to have them move. If there is an even number of squares between the kings, we want to have them move. So we want it to be our move. The same applies for linear opposition. Even number of squares, we want to have them move. Odd number of squares, we want our opponent to have them move. I hope that was helpful, and see you in the next video. Bye.